On the day of my daughter's engagement party, I watched her eyes fill with shame when she introduced me to her future in-laws. That was the moment I realized my own child was embarrassed of who I was, and I decided it was time she learned what true wealth really means. The country club chandeliers sparkled overhead as I adjusted my charcoal suit, the best one I owned. I'd spent 2 hours getting ready, making sure every detail was perfect for Madeline's special day. The lilies I brought, her mother's favorites, were quickly handed off to a waiter and forgotten. I stood alone by the champagne fountain, watching guests in designer clothes laugh and network. The hostess had given me that look when I arrived, the one that says, "You don't belong here." When she read my name tag, her smile tightened. "Oh, Mr. Whitmore, you're Madeline's father. Welcome." My daughter looked stunning that evening, elegant, poised, radiant in ways that reminded me of her mother. But when her eyes met mine across the room, her smile faltered for just a second before she approached. "Dad," she said brightly, hugging me quickly, "I'm so glad you made it." Throughout the night I noticed how she introduced me. "My dad, he's in construction." Nothing more. Meanwhile, Lucas's father was presented as a respected investor and philanthropist. The difference cut deep. During dinner, I couldn't help overhearing nearby conversations. "Madeline's lucky to be marrying into such a successful family," one woman whispered. "Yes," another replied, "though I heard her father isn't exactly from that world." I looked down at my plate, my appetite gone. When the speeches began, Richard Davenport spoke eloquently about family legacy and his son's achievements. Then came Madeline's turn. She thanked everyone for coming and praised Lucas for his ambition. When she mentioned me, her voice changed. And of course my dad, he's always supported me, even if, well, we didn't always see eye to eye on lifestyle choices. A few polite chuckles followed. I forced a smile. Then she added, "He's a simple man. He hates fancy things. I told him not to worry about dressing up too much tonight." The room laughed. My heart sank. Later, I overheard her whisper to a friend, "I just wish he didn't look so plain next to Lucas's family. It's a little embarrassing." Those words hit harder than any physical blow. I sat quietly, hands folded, mind racing between hurt and disbelief. Then the host called me to give a speech. The father of the bride-to-be, Mr. Whitmore. Something inside me shifted as I walked to the microphone. "Thank you," I began softly. "Madeline, I've watched you grow from a little girl with scraped knees into a woman standing beside the man she loves." Guests smiled politely. Madeline looked relieved. "But before I finish," I continued, my voice growing firmer, "I want to thank Lucas's family for welcoming mine, especially you, Richard." Richard raised his glass. "Our pleasure." I smiled faintly. "Funny thing, when Madeline moved into her last apartment, she mentioned your family covered her rent for a few months." Confusion rippled through the room. "So, Richard, did that rent check ever clear? Because my bank statements show I've been sending my daughter $8,000 every month for years." The room went silent. Richard's smile vanished. Madeline's face drained of color. "Dad, stop," she began. "No, sweetheart," I said calmly. "I think it's time we all stopped pretending." I looked around the room. For years, I've been funding an illusion built on shame. Shame of me. I placed the microphone down and walked out, leaving the hall frozen in stunned silence. Have you ever been made to feel like you weren't good enough by someone you loved? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. When my wife died, Madeline was only 6 years old. I still remember her small hand in mine at the funeral, looking up at me with eyes that asked questions I couldn't answer. That day, I made a promise. I would give her everything I could, even if it wasn't much. My construction company provided enough for us to live comfortably. We weren't rich by any measure, but we never went without. Our home was modest but warm. Our car was practical but reliable. And most importantly, we had each other. While other businessmen networked at golf courses, I was sitting in tiny chairs at school plays. When colleagues went to industry dinners, I was helping with science projects at the kitchen table. I chose Madeline over everything else every time. "Dad, why don't you ever go out with your friends?" she asked me once when she was 12. "Because the best part of my day is right here," I told her, helping her with math homework. She smiled then, a smile that made every sacrifice worthwhile. I taught her that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account or the brand of their clothes. Character is what matters, I'd tell her. Kindness, honesty, hard work. And for years, she seemed to understand. She wore second-hand clothes without complaint. She never demanded expensive toys or trips. She even volunteered at the local shelter with me on weekends. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she told me after we finished building a wheelchair ramp for an elderly neighbor. "You help people. That's better than being rich." Those words meant everything to me. When she graduated high school at the top of her class, I couldn't have been prouder. She was brilliant, kind, and seemed to understand what truly mattered in life. "I'm going to make you proud," she promised as she headed off to college. I believed her. I trusted her. I never imagined how much would change. What would you sacrifice for your child? And at what point does sacrifice become enabling? I had to learn this lesson the hard way. The first time I noticed something was different about Madeline was during her second year of graduate school. Her Instagram showed her at a rooftop bar, champagne glass in hand, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I stared at my phone, wondering when my down-to-earth daughter had started caring about designer labels. The caption read, "Living my best life with the elite." The Madeline I raised would have cringed at those words. Our weekly calls grew shorter. "Sorry, Dad, I'm heading to brunch with friends," she'd say, or "Can't talk long, we're going to the theater tonight." Each excuse pushed me further away. When she did visit home, she'd glance around our living room with new eyes, eyes that seemed to catalog every outdated piece of furniture, every simple fixture. She'd check her phone constantly, as if our conversations couldn't hold her attention. "Your life seems pretty glamorous these days," I mentioned once, scrolling through photos of her at yacht parties and exclusive restaurants. She laughed lightly. "Dad, that's just how things are here. Everyone looks successful. It's part of the image." I nodded, not understanding then that image would become more important to her than reality. Every month, I transferred $8,000 into her account, money for tuition, rent, and living expenses. It stretched my finances thin, but I believed in her future. I never questioned why her student apartment cost so much, or why her textbooks seemed to include Gucci handbags. One weekend, she brought home a friend who looked around our house with barely concealed disdain. I overheard Madeline whisper, "It's just temporary. I'm not staying here after graduation." That night, I checked my bank statements. In 2 years, I'd sent her nearly $200,000. Looking at her social media again, I finally understood where it had gone. My daughter was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who valued appearance over substance, price tags over people. "Dad, I have news. Lucas proposed." Madeline's voice bubbled with excitement over the phone. My heart swelled despite my concerns. My little girl was getting married. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, genuinely happy for her. "Tell me about him." What followed was a description not of who Lucas was, but what he had. His family's vacation homes, his executive position at his father's company, his collection of luxury watches. Not once did she mention if he was kind, honest, or hard-working, the values I'd tried to instill in her. "His parents are throwing us an engagement party at Oak Ridge Country Club," she continued, "2 weeks from Saturday." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I promised. There was a pause. "It's formal, Dad," she added gently. "Everyone will be dressed up." The implication hung in the air. My best wasn't good enough for her new world. "I'll wear my best suit," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "And maybe get a haircut at a proper salon," she suggested. "And those shoes you like, the brown ones, they're a bit outdated." Each word felt like a small cut. When had my appearance become something that needed fixing? The next 2 weeks, I prepared meticulously. I bought a new charcoal suit that cost more than I'd ever spent on clothing. I got my hair cut at an expensive salon. I purchased shiny new shoes and a silver tie with a matching pin. The morning of the party, I stopped by a florist to pick up a bouquet of lilies, her mother's favorites. I thought it would be a meaningful touch, a way to include her mom in this milestone. As I drove the 2 hours to the venue, I rehearsed what I might say to Lucas's parents. I wanted to make Madeline proud. I wanted to fit in with these people who would become her new family. I had no idea that in just a few hours everything would fall apart. The moment I walked into that country club, I felt like I had a target on my back. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and everyone, absolutely everyone, was dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly income. Despite my new suit and fresh haircut, I might as well have been wearing a neon sign that flashed, "Doesn't belong." At the registration table, a woman in pearls checked her list with manicured fingers. When she found my name, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "You're Madeline's father. Welcome." The way she said it made me feel like I'd crashed the party rather than been invited. I clutched the lilies tighter and moved into the main hall, scanning the crowd for my daughter. People parted around me like water around a rock, their conversations never pausing to include me. I caught fragments of talk about stock portfolios, vacation homes, and private schools. When I finally spotted Madeline across the room, my heart lifted. She looked beautiful, elegant, and poised in a way that reminded me of her mother. Our eyes met, and for a split second, I saw something flash across her face. Not joy, not love, hesitation. "Dad," she called, her voice bright but tight as she hurried over. She gave me a quick hug, barely making contact. "I'm so glad you made it." "Of course," I said, holding out the lilies. "Your mom's favorite." Madeline's smile faltered. "Thank you, that's sweet." She quickly passed them to a passing waiter without another glance. Let me introduce you to Lucas." Her fiancé was tall and polished, with a firm handshake and a practiced smile. "Mr. Whitmore, pleasure to finally meet you." "Likewise," I replied, searching his face for any sign of the man my daughter had fallen in love with. All I saw was a perfect mask. "And these are Lucas's parents, Richard and Catherine Davenport," Madeline continued. Richard barely looked at me as he shook my hand. "Ah, yes, the construction man. Lucas mentioned you build houses." "I own a construction company," I corrected gently. 25 years now." "How quaint," Catherine said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Self-made men are so American." The conversation moved on as if I weren't there, and Madeline was quickly pulled away by friends, leaving me alone at the edge of her new world. Dinner was served at tables draped in silk, with more forks than I knew what to do with. I was seated far from Madeline, at a table with distant relatives of the Davenports who spoke to each other, but rarely to me. "So, you're in construction?" a woman finally asked, her tone suggesting she might as well have said garbage collection. "Yes, I am," I answered, straightening my shoulders. "I've built over 300 homes in our county." "How interesting," she replied, clearly not interested at all. "My husband's company develops luxury high-rises. Perhaps you've heard of Davenport Towers." Before I could answer, I overheard a conversation from the next table. "Madeline's lucky to be marrying into such a successful family," one woman said. "Yes," another replied, "though I heard her father isn't exactly from that world." I focused on my plate, pushing food around while my appetite disappeared. Throughout the evening, I watched how differently people treated Richard Davenport compared to me. When he spoke, people leaned in. When I spoke, they glanced at their watches. The real gut punch came during the speeches. Richard took the microphone first, speaking eloquently about family legacy and his son's achievements at Princeton and Harvard Business School. The crowd hung on his every word. Then Madeline stepped up. She thanked everyone for coming and praised Lucas for his ambition and vision. When she finally mentioned me, her voice changed subtly. "And of course, my dad. He's always supported me, even if, well, we didn't always see eye to eye on lifestyle choices." A few polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. I forced a smile. Then she added, "He's a simple man. He hates fancy things. I told him not to worry about dressing up too much tonight." The room laughed. My heart cracked. Later, during dessert, I stood alone by the chocolate fountain when I overheard Madeline whispering to her friend near the restrooms, "I just wish he didn't look so plain next to Lucas's family. It's a little embarrassing." Those words hit me like a physical blow. 20 years of sacrifices, of putting her first, of sending every spare dollar I had. And I was an embarrassment to her. I stood frozen, my mind racing between hurt and disbelief. Then the host called me to give a speech. "And now, a few words from the father of the bride-to-be, Mr. Whitmore." The spotlight found me. Polite applause filled the room. Something inside me shifted as I walked to the microphone. I looked at my daughter's face, expectant, slightly nervous. I looked at Richard Davenport's smug smile. I looked at all these people who thought I was nothing because I built homes with my hands instead of moving money around. "Thank you," I began softly. "I wasn't sure I'd be asked to speak tonight." I paused, feeling the weight of my next words. "Madeline, I watched you grow from a little girl with scraped knees into a woman standing beside the man she loves. You've made me proud in more ways than you know." The tension in her shoulders eased, but I wasn't finished. "Before I end, though, I'd like to clear up a small misunderstanding." My phone wouldn't stop ringing the next morning. 17 missed calls from Madeline. I watched each one come in, but couldn't bring myself to answer. What more was there to say after I'd exposed the truth to everyone at that party? I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, replaying the shocked faces, the gasps, Richard Davenport's expression changing from smugness to panic when I mentioned those bounced rent checks. Most of all, I remembered Madeline's face, the color draining away as I revealed I'd been sending her $8,000 every month for years. Around noon, I heard tires on the gravel driveway. Madeline's car pulled up, and she stepped out looking nothing like the polished woman from last night. Her eyes were red, makeup gone, wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt. "Dad," she whispered when I opened the door, "I'm sorry." I stepped aside to let her in but didn't speak. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped her with homework, where we'd eaten thousands of meals together. "Lucas's father, he's not who I thought he was," she finally said, staring at her hands. "After you left, people started asking questions. Turns out his company is in serious debt." I raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. "They were never paying my rent," she continued, her voice breaking. "Lucas was borrowing money from you through me without telling me. That's why the checks bounced." "So all this time, your fiancé's family was pretending to be wealthy?" I asked, stunned despite myself. Madeline nodded tearfully. "And I was pretending too." "Why?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me. "Why was I suddenly not good enough for you?" Her shoulders slumped. "It started small. I'd go out with classmates who came from money. They'd talk about their summer homes and private jets. I felt invisible. Then I met Lucas, and his world seemed so exciting. The more I pretended to fit in, the more I had to hide where I came from." "Where you came from," I repeated slowly, "is a home built on hard work and honesty. Was that really so shameful?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, I see that now, but I got lost in it all. The status, the appearances. I became someone I don't recognize anymore." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Behind the tears, I still saw that little girl who once thought I hung the moon. Somewhere along the way, she'd lost herself, and maybe, in my desire to give her everything, I'd helped her lose her way. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. She wiped her eyes. "I don't know. Everything's fallen apart." "Have you ever had to watch someone you love lose their way? At what point do you step in, and when do you let them learn the hard lesson on their own?" Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my place. That evening, after Madeline went to sleep in her old bedroom, I pulled out my financial records. Something about her revelation didn't sit right with me. If Lucas's family was in debt, how deep did the deception go? I spread bank statements across my desk, tracking every payment I'd made to Madeline over the past 3 years. The total made my stomach turn. $288,000, nearly $300,000 that I'd worked overtime to provide, thinking I was investing in her education and future. I called my old friend Mike, who worked as a financial advisor. "Can you look into something for me? Discreetly?" 2 days later, Mike called back. "Charles, you need to hear this. Davenport Investments isn't what it seems." They've been using new investor money to pay returns to old investors." "A Ponzi scheme?" I asked, my blood running cold. "Not exactly, but close. They're leveraged to the hilt, and word on the street is they've been missing payments to major creditors." I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I searched through Madeline's phone while she slept. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Text messages between her and Lucas revealed he'd been coaching her on how to ask me for money. "Just tell him it's for grad school," one message read. "He'll never check." Another, "My dad needs $50K by Friday. Can you ask your dad for an emergency tuition payment?" I felt sick. This wasn't just about Madeline being ashamed of me. Lucas and his father had been systematically using my daughter to extract money from me. I copied the messages and put her phone back. Then I called my lawyer. "What do you want to do?" he asked after I explained everything. "I want to protect my daughter," I said firmly, "and I want the Davenports to face consequences." "This won't be pretty," he warned. "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I thought about Madeline sleeping in her childhood bedroom, her life in shambles, because of these people who'd manipulated her. "I'm sure," I said. "It's time they learned what real integrity looks like." I chose the coffee shop carefully, public enough that Richard Davenport wouldn't make a scene, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived early, ordered a black coffee, and waited. When he walked in, his designer suit couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes. "Charles," he said stiffly, sliding into the booth across from me, "this is highly irregular." "So is using my daughter to steal nearly $300,000 from me," I replied calmly. His face tightened. "I don't know what Madeline has told you, but—" I placed a folder on the table and slid it toward him. Bank statements, text messages between Lucas and Madeline, and a preliminary report from my financial investigator about Davenport investments. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he opened the folder. His eyes widened as he scanned the contents. "This is private information," he hissed. "So was my bank account," I countered. "Yet somehow your son knew exactly when my deposits cleared and how much I could afford to loan you through my daughter." He closed the folder, his jaw clenched. "What do you want? Money? I can arrange a payment plan." I leaned forward. "I'm not like you, Richard. This isn't about money." "Then what?" "I want you to tell Madeline the truth, all of it. How you and Lucas used her to get to me, how your company is failing, how the wealth you parade around is nothing but smoke and mirrors." Richard's face flushed. "That would destroy my family's reputation. You should have thought about that before you destroyed mine in my daughter's eyes." He studied me for a long moment. "And if I refuse?" I took a sip of coffee. "Then tomorrow morning this folder goes to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I'm sure they'd be very interested in how Davenport Investments has been operating." "You wouldn't dare," he whispered. "Try me," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "You made my daughter believe I wasn't good enough because I work with my hands instead of shuffling paper. You made her ashamed of where she came from. So yes, Richard, I absolutely would dare." His face went pale. "You'll ruin everything." "No," I corrected him. "You did that yourself. I'm just making sure the right people know about it." Richard stood abruptly. "This isn't over." "You're right," I agreed. "You have until tomorrow evening to come clean with Madeline. After that, I make the call." As he stormed out, I felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness that it had come to this. But sometimes the only way to heal is to first cut out the infection. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. "Davenport Investments under investigation," the headline read. Richard hadn't kept his end of our deal, so I'd kept mine. What I hadn't expected was how quickly everything would fall apart. By Wednesday, 3 major clients had pulled their investments. By Thursday, rumors of bankruptcy filled the local business pages. By Friday, Lucas had called off the engagement. Madeline came home that evening, her eyes red but dry, as if she'd cried all the tears she had. "Lucas broke up with me," she said flatly, sitting at our kitchen table. "He said I've caused his family too much trouble." I poured her a cup of tea and sat beside her. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." She looked up, surprised. "You're sorry? After what they did?" "I'm sorry you're hurting," I clarified. "Not sorry they're facing consequences." She nodded slowly. "He told me everything before he ended it. How they've been using me to get money from you. How his father's company has been failing for years." Her voice broke. "He said he never would have proposed if he'd known you would cut me off." The cruelty of those words hung in the air between us. "So he never loved me," she whispered. "I was just an investment." I reached for her hand. "His loss." A small smile flickered across her face, then faded. "Dad, I've been such a fool. I threw away our relationship for people who only saw me as a means to an end." "Not a fool," I corrected gently. "Just someone who got caught up in appearances." She looked around our modest kitchen, the same worn table, the same faded curtains, the same family photos on the wall. "I used to be so happy here. When did I start thinking I needed more?" I had no answer for her. Outside, my phone buzzed with another news alert. "Davenport family selling assets amid financial scandal." Madeline saw it too. "What happens to them now?" "They'll survive," I said. "People like Richard always do. They'll downsize, rebuild, maybe even learn something from this." "And what about us?" she asked quietly. "Can we rebuild too?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were gone. She looked younger, vulnerable, but also more like herself than she had in years. "We already are," I told her, "one day at a time." The first week Madeline moved back home, we barely spoke. She spent most days in her old bedroom, door closed, blinds drawn. I'd leave breakfast outside her door and find the plate untouched hours later. At night, I'd hear her crying softly. But when I knocked, she'd go silent. I gave her space. After all, her entire world had collapsed. Her relationship, her social circle, her identity, everything she'd built her life around had been exposed as a lie. On the 8th day, I came home from work to find her sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by old photo albums. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red but clear. "I found these in the attic," she said quietly. I set down my lunchbox and joined her. The album was open to a picture of the 3 of us, Madeline, her mother, and me, at the beach when Madeline was about 5. We were building a sandcastle, all smiles and sunburned noses. "We were so happy," she whispered, "just the 3 of us." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. She turned the page to her 8th birthday party, a simple backyard gathering with a homemade cake and a few neighborhood friends. Remember how you stayed up all night making that butterfly cake because I changed my mind at the last minute? Your mother was furious with me for using all the food coloring. I chuckled. Madeline's finger traced the image. We didn't have much, but I never felt like I was missing anything. You weren't, I said softly. She closed the album and finally looked me in the eyes. Dad, she said, her voice breaking, I forgot who I was. The simple honesty of those words hit me harder than any apology could have. No, honey, I replied, taking her hand. You just forgot who we are. Tears filled her eyes. Can I ever fix this? I squeezed her hand. Love isn't about fancy parties or public image. It's about truth. You don't have to fix it. You just have to live it differently from now on. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I don't even know where to start. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Behind the hurt and shame, I could still see the strong, kind person I'd raised. She'd lost her way, but her compass wasn't broken. You start by remembering what matters, I told her, and then you build from there. That night, we ate dinner together at the kitchen table for the first time in years. The conversation was awkward at times, raw at others, but it was real, and that was enough for now. Dad, do you need help with that? Madeline called from the porch, watching me struggle with a stack of lumber. It had been 3 weeks since she moved back home, and today was the first time she'd offered to join me on a job site. I was building a wheelchair ramp for Mrs. Peterson, an elderly widow whose husband I'd worked with years ago. Sure, I said, trying to hide my surprise. Grab those 2x4s. Madeline had never shown interest in construction before. As a teenager, she'd complained about the sawdust I tracked into the house and the calluses on my hands. Now, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By midday, we'd made good progress. Madeline learned quickly, measuring twice before cutting, holding boards steady while I hammered. Her hands, once perfectly manicured, now had dirt under the nails and a small blister forming on her thumb. During our lunch break, Mrs. Peterson brought us iced tea. You must be Charles's daughter, she said, smiling at Madeline. He talks about you all the time. Madeline glanced at me, surprised. All good things, I hope. The best, Mrs. Peterson assured her. He says you're the smartest person he knows. A flush crept up Madeline's cheeks. I don't feel very smart lately. Mrs. Peterson patted her hand. Intelligence isn't just about books and degrees, dear. It's about knowing what matters. After she went inside, Madeline was quiet for a long time. Is that why you brought me here today? She finally asked. To teach me what matters? I shook my head. I brought you because I needed help, and you offered. But there's more to it than that, she pressed. I set down my sandwich. When I build something, I know it's going to last. I know it's going to help someone. At the end of the day, I can point to it and say, I made that. Can you say the same about the life you were living? She looked down at her hands, now dirty and sore from honest work. No, she admitted, I can't. Then maybe it's time to build something different, I suggested. For the first time in weeks, Madeline smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I think I'd like that. Dad, what do you think of these designs? Madeline spread blueprints across my kitchen table, her eyes bright with excitement. 6 months had passed since the engagement disaster. In that time, my daughter had transformed, not back into the person she was before, but into someone new, someone better. I studied the drawings. They showed affordable housing units with smart, efficient layouts and unexpected touches of beauty. Window seats, built-in bookshelves, front porches designed for actual sitting. "These are good," I said, genuinely impressed. "Really good." Madeline beamed. "The Housing Foundation loved them. They want to partner with your company to build a pilot community." After weeks of helping me on job sites, Madeline had discovered she had a talent for design, specifically creating homes that were both affordable and dignified. She'd volunteered her skills at a local housing foundation, and now her passion project was becoming reality. 20 units to start, she continued, pointing to the site plan. "If it works, they'll fund 50 more next year." I looked at my daughter, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, hands slightly calloused from work. No designer clothes, no fancy jewelry, just Madeline, authentic and alive. "You know what this means, right?" I asked. "Working with my company in construction?" She nodded. "It means getting dirty, long hours, dealing with contractors and permits and weather delays." A smile spread across her face. "And I can't wait." That evening, as we reviewed the budget for the project, my phone rang. It was Mike, my financial advisor friend. "Charles, you won't believe this," he said. "Richard Davenport just filed for bankruptcy, personal and business." After he hung up, I told Madeline the news. "Do you feel vindicated?" she asked quietly. I considered the question. "No," I finally said. "I just feel grateful." "For what?" "That we build things that last," I replied, tapping her blueprints, "while they built castles in the air." She smiled, understanding completely. The community center buzzed with excitement. Tonight was the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Hope Village, the affordable housing community Madeline had designed and our company had built. Local officials, future residents, and community supporters filled the room. I stood at the back, watching my daughter prepare to speak. Gone was the woman who had once been embarrassed by her simple father. In her place stood someone confident in who she was and what she had created. The mayor introduced her. And now, the visionary behind Hope Village, Madeline Whitmore. Applause filled the room as she stepped to the podium. She looked beautiful, not because of expensive clothes or perfect makeup, but because of the purpose that radiated from her. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Hope Village isn't just about providing housing. It's about creating homes where families can build their futures with dignity." As she spoke about sustainable design in community spaces, I felt a swell of pride, unlike anything I'd experienced before. This wasn't just my daughter succeeding. This was her succeeding on her own terms, with integrity. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. None of this would exist without one person, my father, Charles Whitmore. She looked directly at me. "Dad, would you join me up here?" Surprised, I made my way to the stage. Madeline took my hand. "A year ago, I lost my way," she continued, her voice steady despite the personal admission. "I became someone who valued appearance over substance, status over character. I was even ashamed of this man, the most honorable person I know." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the typical ribbon-cutting speech. My father taught me that true wealth isn't measured by your bank account or the brand of your clothes. It's measured by what you build, what you give, and who you lift up along the way. She turned to face me, tears in her eyes. "Dad, you never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself. You showed me that a life of integrity might not be glamorous, but it's rich in ways that matter." The audience rose to their feet, applauding, but I barely heard them. In that moment, it was just my daughter and me, the circle complete, the lesson learned, the love restored. As we cut the ribbon together, I realized that sometimes the most valuable things we build aren't made of wood and nails, but of truth and second chances. On my 65th birthday, I decided to semi-retire. After 4 decades of building homes with my hands, my back needed a break. Madeline insisted on throwing me a party, nothing fancy, just a backyard barbecue with people who mattered. As I watched her move among the guests, confidently discussing the next phase of Hope Village, I marveled at how far we'd come. The housing initiative she'd started had grown to 3 communities, providing homes for over 100 families. My construction company, now with Madeline as a partner, had never been more successful. Later that evening, we drove to the cemetery together. It had become our tradition to visit her mother on important days. Madeline placed lilies on the headstone, her mother's favorites. "Mom would be proud of you," I said quietly. "Of us," Madeline corrected, linking her arm through mine. I think about her a lot when I'm designing. I try to create spaces where families can build memories like we did. We stood in comfortable silence, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold. "You know," Madeline said finally, "I saw Lucas last week." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "How is he?" "Working at his uncle's car dealership, living in a 1-bedroom apartment." She shrugged. "He looked unhappy." "And how did that make you feel?" She considered the question. "Grateful," she said simply, "for the lesson, for the second chance, for understanding what real wealth means before it was too late." I squeezed her hand, my heart full. For the first time in years, I felt truly rich,